Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on my channel where I am sick again, and it sucks, but I'm still filming a video, and today I thought I would film a video talking about all the books that make me cry. I used to consider myself one of those people who doesn't cry in books because there were only a select few I could think of that had made me feel really genuine emotion, but oh boy, has that changed. It started pretty small with a few tears just quietly shed over an emotional moment in a book, and over time it's just kind of developed and evolved into this unhealthy habit where I kind of cry way too often in books. Obviously, I'm not going to say which moments in these books made me cry because I don't want to accidentally spoil it for people who haven't read them yet. But I thought it would be kind of fun to start with the books that just had me shedding like one delicate tear and work my way up to the many books that had me ugly crying. So the first book that made me cry a few tiny tears is George by Alex Gino, which is short. It's a children's book and it's about an 8-year-old transgender child who was born George but knows that she is a girl, and it was just emotional because it's dealing with identity and people accepting that identity in someone of such a young age. And I didn't like cry a lot in this, but it just brought a few tears to my eyes. This next book is one that I kind of hate myself for tearing up in because every time I think about what happened now, it just makes me mad. But it's Allegiant by Veronica Roth, which is the final book in the Divergent series. There's just something that happens in this, and I'm not going to say what because spoilers, but it made me tear up even though it was a really stupid thing to happen with the plot. It just made me a little bit emotional. I also teared up just a little bit in Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo, which is the third book in the Grisha trilogy, and I finished this yesterday, and it sounds really silly when I say it now, but there was just one moment where the characters were relatively safe, and I got really suddenly concerned that they were going to be in danger again soon, and I just teared up a little bit, and I can hear how silly it sounds now that I'm saying it, but when I read this yesterday, it totally made sense for me to tear up at that moment. On to the books that actually made me shed quite a few tears, and the first is Wonder by R.J. Palacio, which is another children's book. This is about a boy with facial deformities who starts at school for the first time after being homeschooled for a portion of his life, and it's just about the ways that people respond to him and the way that he deals with, you know, the scrutiny of teachers and students and stuff, and it was just really emotional, and I ended up crying a decent amount in it because I just found it really emotional. And I feel like most people who've read this have probably experienced something similar, but it's just an excellent and emotional book, which if you haven't read, I would recommend. Next up is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J Maas, which I cried a surprising amount in, just because in that final third when there's a lot of drama and stuff like that, I was really incredibly concerned for the safety of the characters that I loved, and I just was preemptively in anticipation crying because I was scared one of them was going to die or something. And it's kind of ridiculous that I cried just because I was anticipating drama, but still, great book. Next up is We All Looked Up by Tommy Wallach, where the characters find out that they have this asteroid heading for Earth and there's a pretty good chance it's going to hit and kill everyone, and so they realize they have about 2 months before collision, which means they have 2 months to live. And it's just incredibly emotional. I found it really powerful because it was about people dealing with their mortality and not having control over their lives and trying to use that 2 months to be the best version of themselves. It was just incredibly emotional, and it made me cry quite a lot. Not ugly crying, just regular, normal crying. But this is just an excellent book that, yeah, made me feel a lot of emotions. First book that comes to mind when I think about ugly crying while reading is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak, which just absolutely destroyed me emotionally. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about it, and if you've read it and you don't know what I'm talking about, then what is wrong with you? This book was just so incredibly emotional. I actually had to put it down for 5 minutes so I could sob a little bit before resuming the story. It was just an incredible book that is probably one of the most emotional things I've ever read. Next up is Me Before You by Jojo Moyes, which if you've read, you know why it's emotional. This is a love story where there's a little bit more to it than just the two of them falling in love. And I cried in the movie trailer. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I'm expecting to cry a lot in it, and this is just such an emotional book that is just great. Next up is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, which I have a very clear memory of reading on a long car trip with my family, and I got to a certain point and there were like tears everywhere and I had to stop for a minute, and my brother was like, what the hell is wrong with you? And I was like, my book is just really emotional, and he was like, okay. And then after about 10 minutes I picked it up and finished reading and was doing that thing where I was trying not to cry but also needed to cry, so I was just kind of like my face scrunched up with like tears everywhere, like This next one I've mentioned in a few other videos as a book that is excellent and also made me incredibly emotional, and it's We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson, which made me cry so many tears. I think there were 5 or 6 separate points in this book where I was crying a decent amount, and then towards the end it was ugly tears just constantly. There's not many other books that have made me cry this much, like wow. Just wow. Alright, so the final book that made me cry ugly tears also wins the award for the most I have ever cried in a book, and it's Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling. I cried from In the Forest Again until the end, and I remember finishing this for the first time and I was sitting downstairs in the kitchen with the book on my lap just crying, and my mum was on her way out and she was like, Caroline sweetie, what's wrong? And I was like, Mum, my book, it's over, I finished it. And I was just like sobbing and crying because I'd finished Harry Potter and that was it. And she kind of didn't know how to deal with it and just like patted me on the shoulder and left, and I'm pretty sure I cried for like another half an hour after that just because this book was so emotional. I know that there's a point in every Harry Potter book and movie where I cry, but this is the one that made me cry the most the first time I read it, and is just an incredibly emotional book and I love it just so much. That's it for the books that made me cry, and I don't know about you guys, but I actually think there's something really satisfying about having a good cry over a book. So let me know down in the comments what some books are that made you cry, whether it was ugly tears or just a few little tears. But I upload videos every Wednesday and Saturday, so be sure to like and subscribe and tune in on those days for more bookish goodness. Toodaloo!